welcome back to our program. So, what are the questions you have today? Are there actually still more questions than answers?
Oh, absolutely. There are more questions than answers. I think the first question on my mind is, was Prigozhin alone? Or were people in the Kremlin or in Moscow actually supporting his efforts as a way to weaken Putin inside Russia? It's something we don't know anything about. We don't know where Prigozhin is. We don't know where Putin is. We are still watching what the next steps will be. It is hard to imagine that Putin will accept this attack on his leadership without repercussions of some kind, going after and trying to kill Prigozhin. And Prigozhin, anticipating that, is going to have protected himself somewhere and be planning what he can do as well. Ultimately, and I hate to keep going on here, but this is about the narrative. This is about what they're telling the Russian people. Prigozhin wants to be seen as a hero, as a savior of Russia, that the people leading Russia were leading them astray. And Putin wants to be seen also as the savior of Russia against a mutiny. So that's why they are doing this dance really off screen right now to see how they can position themselves about where this goes next.
Can I just pick up on what you said? It'd be interesting to know how much support Prigozhin had from within the establishment. I mean, clearly not enough, otherwise he wouldn't have turned around.
Well, first off, the amount of support he had is really striking. He took over the military base in Rostov-on-Don, the military base in Voronezh, and did so without firing a shot. He had people in the streets bringing flowers and bread and water, and so there was clearly a show of support for Prigozhin in doing this. And everybody else who should have been on Putin's team here was just kind of sitting it out. Some were even getting on their airplanes. So it showed a relative weakness for Putin and a relative warmth towards Prigozhin. That is really striking. He may not have accumulated the forces that he wanted to be able to take Moscow, but he showed that he actually has some resonance in the Russian military and the Russian population.
So let me ask you then what the United States should do about this. The president was very clear, and actually all weekend, none of the NATO allies came out with anything much more than, we're watching the situation, we're talking to our partners. They obviously didn't want to give any excuse to anybody, like the foreign minister Lavrov already has, said that investigation will commence on whether the West was involved in this. We heard what President Biden said today. What next from the US perspective and from the NATO perspective?
Well, first, several things. First off, I think it's important to make clear, as President Biden has done, as Secretary Blinken has done, that we have nothing to do with this. There will be efforts to blame the West, and we should preempt them by saying, we had nothing to do with this. This is an internal Russian thing. The second thing is we should drop the restrictions on aid to Ukraine. The Russian soldiers sitting in trenches in Ukraine right now do not want to be there. They know that their country is coming apart behind them. They know the imperial quest that Putin has set them on is failing, and they don't want to be there. So we should be giving Ukraine what it needs to help push them out, and that will help convince them to leave on their own. And then finally, I think that NATO needs to recognize that all of this depends, all of this the future of European security depends upon Ukraine being secure in the future. So that if Russia is left on its own, it will regroup, it will attack again. This will be a threat to all of Europe, not only Ukraine. So as NATO convenes in Vilnius, July 11th and 12th, they need to send a clear signal that Ukraine is on the way into membership.
So, okay, we'll get to that in a second, but I'm really interested to hear what you say, that they should give Ukraine what it needs. A lot of the narrative about the West, particularly the United States, method of delivering weapons has been to do enough but not too much to antagonize Putin and, prompt some irrational response. Are you basically saying now that that equation should be out of the door because you've seen a weakness in Russia?
Well, my own view, Christian, is that that is a wrong calculation. That's the boiling the frog argument, that we've gone slowly, we've increased, but we haven't provoked. My view on that is if Putin could have done more already, he would have already done it. That he's not in this war in Ukraine to lose, he's in it to win. And if he could add more troops, if he could attack somewhere else, if he thought that attacking a NATO ally would help him, he would have done it. The fact is that he knows he is losing in Ukraine. He can't possibly open another front somewhere else, least of all with a NATO country. He couldn't possibly handle that. Nuclear weapons won't solve his problem. And I think he knows that. So he is putting these messages out to deter us rather than to actually mean that he's going to go in these various directions. Mm-hmm. We ought to understand that, and we should be pouring on the support to Ukraine now.
It's going to be really interesting to see whether other, leaders actually do this, because many have said that had it been a lot earlier, we might already have seen a major, change on the battlefield. But let me ask you, because look, there are those who say that what happened over the weekend, and I think you've said it as well, basically popped the Putin bubble. Yeah. Others might think that actually, it's Prigozhin that's on the run, it's the Wagner people who turned around, and Putin is still pretty much in charge. I want to play this bite, part of an interview from Secretary Blinken, because it relates to this, and we'll talk about it.
The fact that you have from within someone directly questioning Putin's authority, directly questioning the premises that upon which he launched this aggression against Ukraine, that in and of itself is something very, very powerful. It adds cracks. Where those go, when they get there, too soon to say, but it clearly raises new questions that Putin has to deal with.
So, Ambassador Volker, clearly there was a lot of wishful thinking over the weekend and a certain amount of disappointment from the cognoscenti, if you like, when Prigozhin turned round. What do you think? I mean, it's very Byzantine. These are two, essential gangsters fighting for supremacy and money and power. What do you think? Is Putin stronger because he survived, or the opposite, because he's been challenged?
Christian, I think you asked exactly the right question, because you framed it in the sense of these are gangsters. This is a mafia mentality that we're looking at. Putin cannot live with having been challenged this way. It is a threat to his control of Russia, to his legitimacy, if he is seen to be weak. So he has no choice now but to go after Prigozhin. I think Prigozhin knew this, knows this. He stood down to position himself as the reasonable person, the one who doesn't want to destroy the state. But then if Putin goes after him, it gives him a justification for trying again, for somehow pushing back again. So there are many shoes left to drop that we haven't seen. Now, as far as the U.S. policy goes, again, I just want to come back to that. The U.S. has no stake in this other than to say, get out of Ukraine, live within your own borders, and accept responsibility for the war that you launched. Who runs Russia? There's no way we control that, no way we can do that, and we shouldn't pretend that we're involved in that. So I think we've got that part of it right.
Okay, very quick question about Putin has also been, at least certainly the United States is concerned that he's able to build up a coalition of those who support him, powerful countries like China, to an extent, India, against the United States. This is what the China, Foreign Ministry said on the weekend. This is Russia's internal affair. As Russia's friendly neighbor and comprehensive strategic partner of coordination for the new era, China supports Russia in maintaining national stability and achieving development and prosperity. So they didn't use the name Putin, and frankly, they didn't put this out until it was clear that the whatever it was aborted. Yeah. On the bigger strategic level, how is this going to affect?
Well, those people who have suggested that China is a strategic ally of Russia and is helping Russia, I think have misread the tea leaves here. China is very happy for Russia to try to weaken the West. They can get anything from Russia that they want for cash, whether it's minerals or whether it's energy, oil, gas, etc. They're not invested in Putin's war. And I think they actually look down on Russia. They don't have a lot of respect for Russia because they view it as a declining power that doesn't take care of the state and doesn't take care of the people. China is very much the opposite of that. So I'm not at all surprised that China, looking at this, says it's just one more mess, more chaos. Putin is not the strong leader that he pretends to be, and we're just going to sit this out and watch.
Okay.
China has time on its side, and Russia to China appears intemperate and desperate.